Hi, I'm Valerie, and I'm going to talk to you about the books I challenged, conquered, or, read in the month of October. There were five-ish. There's a couple I'm still working on, but that is another video, probably next month. So let's round them up. I read River of Night by John Ringo and Mike Massa, The Passenger by Lutz, Stay Sexy and Don't Get Murdered, The Definitive Guide by Karen Kilgariff and Georgia Hardstark, and Born to Run by Bruce Springsteen, and Gross Anatomy Dispatches from the Front and Back by Mara Altman. So, disclaimers. Here be spoilers. I will try not to give away the entirety of the book, but I am going to talk sort of my likes and dislikes. So, in all likelihood, if you have not read the book or are very sensitive to that sort of thing, this might not be the video for you. So, hopefully I'll just be able to pique your interest and get you kind of thinking about some of these books, or if you've read them already. I will post in the description of this video a link to the Goodreads for each one of these books, so if you're interested, maybe you can read what some other people think. I'll also let you know what the Great Reads rating was and give kind of my own opinion for that as well. So first things first, in sort of the order that I read them this month, we have River of Night. It's the sixth book in the Black Tide Rising series, which is a zombie book because I love zombies, and post-apocalyptic fiction. So according to Great Reads, at the time that I pulled these, the rating on this book was a 4.6. It was not quite that high for me. It was probably like a 3.5, high threes, in my opinion. I did not like it as much as some of the earlier books, but it definitely did have some moments that I really enjoyed because of the content. It was a fast read for me as well. I mean, it took me like a day and a half in my spare time reading this. Synopsis, if you're not familiar with the series, there's been a zombie apocalypse, but never fear. We have some super preppers who in the background have kind of set up for themselves some bases, and as a collective, they've set up some fortified areas so that they can survive. So if you've read any of the other series, this is a retelling or a continuation of, but from a slightly different perspective, from different characters being the protagonist of some of the same events that are covered in the earlier books. So these SWAT types, or super preppers as we'll call them, not to give too much away, are headed out and trying to make it to safety. Along the way, they also have a teacher and students. So they're making their way from the coast down towards these positions of safety. You're also hearing what's happening with some of the people that have already evacuated to safety. Along the way, they encounter some psychopaths of various calibers. Most of the focus was on these human villains who are in various ways challenging our protagonists. Actually, in this book, the zombies seemed more nuisance, more than the actual like bad guys in the story, which is not my favorite tact to take for this. I liked it. I did, but I sort of wondered, the authors this time, John Ringo is the originator of the series and sort of the whole world. Mike Massa was the co-author on this, and I wondered if it was what the ratio of John Ringo to Mike Massa was in this, because I feel like it was sort of a departure from some of the other ones in this series. Some things that were John Ringo specific: that man loves details. He loves the infrastructure. He loves that, he wants to give you like all the details about that, which I actually really like. Like, it seems really well researched to me. which I like that. Some problems that I had with it, as I mentioned, the zombies seemed like secondary villains, which I was not as crazy about. Also, like the characters that are driving to Tennessee, that it just seemed almost too casual. Like I expected more issues along the way. Things I really did love about it, you saw the return of the character Kathy Ostroga, who's really fun and is really bright spots of humor in the book. In the appendix, there's an included section that has kind of the rules that she kind of has been quoting between this and the book that this is more of a sequel to, which is called Valley of Shadows. So I really enjoyed her and her story and her parts in it. I don't love the love element, the romance element. I'm not somebody who's crazy about that, so that could have been cut out for me as well. So I would definitely read, if when another book comes out, I would definitely read it, even with these asides. Second book that I read this month was called The Passenger, and it's by Lisa Lutz. According to Great Reads, it's about a 3.7, and it's right around there, maybe even a little higher for me. It's a very fast-paced book. So in synopsis, if you're not familiar with the book, and I just so happen to have it right here, a lady finds her husband dead, and she decides to take off instead of, calling the authorities and going through that rigmarole. And as the story progresses, you find she's been down this road before, that being on the run is not something that's new to her. And there's a lot of questions in this. You don't know her backstory. More and more is revealed as the story goes on. It's clear she's had a dark past. And it's sort of implied, or at least I was thinking through most of the book, that she was a murderer or something very dark that she was the proponent of, or the driving force behind, is what it seemed like to me in most of the book. And you're really asking, like, as she goes through this, how far is she going to go in establishing a new identity and staying a step ahead of pursuers that are following her. I enjoyed it overall. It was a good book. Like I said, the pacing was really fast. I think it was really effective in building tension, and you felt the desperation of the character and you kind of followed them on that journey. You empathized with her. Even as you were questioning, is this a hero, an anti-hero? What is this? It was an easy read. I read it really quickly. Twists, turns, you really got caught up in the action. As I was thinking about it later, as that kind of dust settles, you start to point out some of the flaws. One of the characters that she meets while she's on the run is named Blue, and she's sort of, you're not entirely sure her story. Is she a victim? Is she a sociopath? Is she a benevolent fairy godmother? She was kind of problematic in some ways. She was an interesting character, but there was a little bit of, afterwards I was asking, like, how could she have known these things, or how did she accomplish some of the things that happened in the story? You see correspondence between her and Ryan, a love interest from the past throughout. He's problematic for me as well. He was a tool. And at the very end, I'm thinking, how did he end up blaming her, for his screwy life? Like, a lot of entitlement there. And then at the very end, when all is sort of revealed, and not that I'm going to say exactly what it was, I felt it was out of sync. Like, the story as it actually ended up, or your understanding of her as a character, was disappointing. Like, I didn't like it that much. All right. So next up, book 3 was Stay Sexy and Don't Get Murdered, The Definitive Guide by Karen Kilgariff and Georgia Hardstark. And this is a set of essays, memoirish, dual memoir, from the very popular podcast My Favorite Murder. Synopsis wise, really good, almost self-help style book. Goodreads gives it a 4.2, and I would say it's there. It's definitely in the 4 realm for me as well. It was surprisingly good. I got turned on to the podcast because I listened to Georgia Hardstark was on another podcast I listened to years ago called Slumber Party with Allie and Georgia. And one of my guilty pleasures or favorite things from the book was finding out finally what happened as a backstory to the relationship between Allie Ward and Georgia Hardstark. Allie Ward being an actress in her own right. She has her own podcast called Ologies, which is really good, and I would recommend if anyone's a podcast listener as well. But anyway, there was a fallout in that friendship, and it just kind of, the Slumber Party podcast just kind of stopped, and I never knew why. And I transitioned into listening to My Favorite Murder. I love true crime. I watch ID Network way too much, so it was right up my alley. Alley. And I've kind of had a love-hate relationship with it as it's gone on. I really liked it in the beginning. I've had some frustrations with just sort of the level of research or lack of research that Karen and Georgia do. I am a Karen myself, so I love her. I think her humor is great. Her sarcasm is great. She's a little self-deprecating, which is great. She has my heart, but after this book, I do have a greater appreciation for Georgia. So I loved the format of back and forth. I didn't love that the chapter titles are sort of famous quotes and things that they've had t-shirts and, stitched on things for My Favorite Murder. And sometimes I felt like they were kind of trying to cram the content of the essays and just trying to find like a thread to connect it, since they maybe picked the titles of the chapters going in. That was a little distracting at times. I wrote down a ton of Karen quotes that just resonated with me. She had a lot of stuff about friendship and kind of finding your tribe, a lot of stuff about self-acceptance, which I really liked. Just a couple of them. She says, your imperfections aren't a reason to hide. They're actually the key to connecting with all of the other imperfect humans around you. And I think that deserves its own Instagram post or whatever. Another is, we're all crazy and scared and searching. No one gets to use that against you. It's not proof that you're broken. It's proof you're human. Kind of along same lines, very, very reassuring. And then finally, get used to being wrong, saying you're sorry and staying open to possibilities. You won't feel so panicked when things don't go according to plan. And the less you panic, the less you'll feel the need to find someone with the answer. And then she goes on to talk about having a close circle of friends. So I really feel like that we, as the reader, benefited from many of the years of therapy that clearly Karen and Georgia have had, which is one of the great things about them, is that they're so open about talking about themselves as imperfect humans. The book and the podcast both make them feel very much like girls, like girls like yourself, where it feels like, hey, I could do this. I find these things funny. So that's really cool. Like I said, I did like Georgia's writing more than I thought. I felt like I kind of grew in an affinity for her after reading this book. I love her quoting, I think, her grandmother saying, bigger dummies than you, that, why not try things? there's plenty of people out there, bigger dummies than you, that are trying it. I think I can take that to heart in terms of like even attempting to do these videos. Another quote that I really liked from Georgia: if you don't wake up stoked to be you, figure out the first step that you can take toward the life you want. Once you've taken that first step, then figure out the next step, and so on. So again, with the, self-help sort of theme of this book, I felt like that was dead on, and I liked it. Next book that I conquered in October was one that I listened to. It was the audio book Born to Run by Bruce Springsteen. And it was outstanding. 4.19 according to Goodreads, solid 4 for me. Some sections seemed longer than others. I mean, it's 18 hours of audiobook, so it's a lot for anyone. He's really hard not to love if you don't love him already. A hardworking man. I was planning to read the book, but then I learned that he read it. Who wouldn't want Bruce whispering his life story in your ear? So I definitely jumped on the audiobook, and I've been enjoying it for when I'm doing housework or walking or, whatever. Some moments were definitely more endearing than others. I definitely shed a few tears listening to him tell of his complicated relationship with his father, who was a very taciturn man, who had troubling issues with his mental health, could be controlling, etc. Especially the sections towards the end of his father's life were tough to listen to, but really like touching. Bruce's love of family and his searching nature were so relatable and so human. And I really loved pausing the recording to step away and like listen to the songs that he was talking about in various sections, because he kind of goes through his own evolution, obviously chronologically. So you're learning about different songs and sort of the backstory for them. So it was really cool to be able to listen to those, and you just felt closer to his music, kind of knowing some of this backstory and history surrounding it. And it's just really, I found it incredibly admirable that he was so honest in sharing his lifelong battle with depression and just the weight of that on his shoulders. So I would definitely recommend it. It was well worth the listen. And if you don't know this, the synopsis of the book, local boy makes good, is kind of, America's sweetheart, Bruce Springsteen. He was born humble circumstances in Freehold, New Jersey, working class family, and goes on to eventual, fame and acclaim. He's still somebody out there who's doing it. Really awesome. Becomes, music megastar, much beloved. And the final book that I read for October was called Gross Anatomy: Dispatches from the Front and Back by Mara Altman. This one has a 3.77 Goodreads rating. And I am in disagreement with that. I'd say like maybe 2.5 stars if I was going to rate it. The book is a somewhat scientific exploration, more like a cultural exploration, I guess, of things like camel toe, hemorrhoids, body hair, other mysteries of the female body. And this was actually something that I read with a group of friends. My book club tackled it. And we haven't met yet, so I don't know what they thought. We picked it in part because the synopsis compared it to, Mary Roach, who I love. Mary Roach. Mary Roach is more of a hardcore science writer with some humorous readings. I find her stuff incredibly readable. I love it. And to be fair, it's not like Mara called herself Mary Roach, but I feel like it's a stretch to compare her to Mary Roach or to describe her writing as Mary Roach like Mary Roach is, to me, is hard science with humor. And this was more humor with some light science. So it felt very different to me. And I feel like the comparison might have even, reading that initially might have set up some expectations that impacted how I approached the book. There were moments that I thought were funny that I definitely chuckled, but I found a lot of the book to be kind of reaching, trying hard, or maybe just the humor did not align for me. Things like the author's use of the word hump to describe sex was weird for me. I don't know, it felt laborious. I needed to finish the book for a book club, and I just, no. I did finish it, but I definitely was not enjoying it towards the end. I was kind of forcing myself to read it. I also feel like maybe coming from the standpoint of a feminist, like I wanted more science, I wanted more historical and cultural context, and I wanted more of a dismissal of that institutionalized ideals, especially for things that, just seem, I don't know, just seemed like I wanted her to indict all of the cultural pressure for women to conform to things like, being hairless throughout your body. And I felt like that was not there. The condemnation was not as strong as I would have liked. So no, I don't think I'd necessarily recommend this one. It was light, but like I said, it felt a little more like work. Anyway, so that's what I tackled in October. I have several books that I haven't finished, and I'm already kind of pushing out into the first week in November. So I did want to capture all of these in one place. I'll have other inclusions of the stuff that I'm still reading in later video content. So thanks for watching. I'm definitely new and learning as I go. So if you liked this, I would certainly encourage you to like, comment, subscribe, and I'll have more stuff coming out soon. Thanks very much. Bye.